Good evening. My name is Helen Anthony. I'm the chair of the Committee on Finance. I'm calling to order a regular meeting on Thursday, March 13th, 2025 at 5:37 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chairwoman Anthony.
Here.
Vice Chairman Taylor.
Here.
Counselor Antoine. Here. Councilwoman Briggs.
Here.
Counselor Sanchez.
Here.
We have 5 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I'd like to recognize, we have many members of the council here this evening. Thank you so much. We have Council President Miller. We have Councilor Espinal, Councilor Pichardo, Councilwoman Ryan, Councilor Vargas, and Councilwoman Peterson, and Councilor Gonzalez. I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. I'd also like to thank our Ken Chegarini from the City Solicitor's Office. And who else am I missing? And I always like to give a special thanks to Don and Carissa, who does do such a good job. Okay, we have our Madam Auditor, and also we have our Chief Policy Area, Mr. Gardner, as well as the entire policy team. Thank you. Okay. All right, with that, I am going to take some things out of order today. I would like to motion to take item number 3 out of order. Motion to bring the law, seconded by Councilor Sanchez. All in favor? Aye. All opposed. All right, with that, Madam Clerk, would you please read agenda item 5?
Resolution endorsing and urging passage by the General Assembly of House Bill 2025 H-5512 and Senate Bill 2025 S-0191, an act relating to taxation, property subject to taxation.
Okay, and is there anyone here from Weber Renew that is here presenting on this evening? Okay, hi, how are you? Well, please come to the end of the table and we will swear you in.
Please swear on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And please state your name for the record.
Anna Jean Wilkin.
Thank you so much for coming. Before we start with you, I am going to mark as exhibit 1. We have a letter support. We started with support for this resolution, and it's from Weber Renew. And I would like to mark this as exhibit 1. May I have a motion?
Second.
A motion made by Councilor Annabelle, seconded by Councilor Graves. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Wonderful. Please, if you would continue.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, members of the Finance Committee, so many other members of the City Council. I know you have a pretty robust conversation, it seems like tonight, so I'll try to be quick. My name is Anna Jean Wilkin. I'm the Director of Strategy at Project Weber Renew. I just want to talk a little bit about what Project Weber Renew does and why we're coming seeking property tax exemption. So for folks who don't know, Project Weber Renew is a nonprofit based in South Providence, right next to the Rhode Island Hospital campus. We recently purchased a building at 45 Willard Avenue. We serve mostly people experiencing homelessness, people with substance use disorder, and very low income people. So last year we served over 3,000 individuals, unique individuals from the city of Providence. 80% of those people were experiencing homelessness, and 99.9% of them were very low income. We provide a whole range of services. We have a drop-in center that has warming and cooling services, basic needs, food, laundry, clothing, hygiene supplies, case management, referrals to recovery housing, peer recovery supports. We do outreach where we go out into the community, whether it's in Kennedy Plaza, to encampments to provide services as well. And at our new location at 45 Willard Avenue, we also have on-site medical services, which are really amazing. So people can walk in, they can get access to behavioral health services. We have a full-time nurse who can provide physical health services and part-time doctors who provide specialty care. And then also at that location, we have the country's first state regulated overdose prevention center, which is a place where people can come in and under state law and state regulations consume substances on site and be saved from overdoses So far, we've seen over 400 visits since we opened in mid-January, and we've done 20 overdose interventions. That's a little bit of what we do. I'm happy to answer any questions. But basically, we purchased this location at 45 Willard Avenue last year. We are a nonprofit, and we are seeking property tax exemptions. So this is a resolution in support of the state legislation that's being proposed both by Rep. Batista and Senator Mack, to give us property tax exemption. This would help really with financial sustainability of our programs, especially right now when we know that public health measures and especially measures that support people experiencing homelessness and people who use drugs are under attack. And would really be a direct investment in some of the city's most vulnerable residents. So that's why we're coming to the council and to the state legislator, but I'm happy to answer it. Thank you all so much for yours.
Thank you very much. Committee members first. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Maybe real quick, well, what is the figure for the tax?
So it depends a little bit on how it's reassessed, right? But right now it's over $100,000 a year, about $110,000.
Do you know if Kodak and them, do they get tax abatements as well or no?
So we currently, there's 3 organizations that are located at our facility. There's Project Weber Renewed, which is nonprofit for the state of Rhode Island. We also rent to Sojourner House, which, as you all know, is another nonprofit. They do have property tax exemption, I believe, through their other properties. And then we also rent, or well, we don't rent, but we host the clinic by Victa, which is another service provider. So all of the entities within there are charitable organizations. But I do know that I can't speak for all of the different organizations and their property tax exemptions, but I do believe it's quite common for other nonprofit sort of treatment providers in this field. So
Does anybody, Larry, do you know the Kodak? Or are they?
Council
Exempt,
Taylor,
I'm sorry.
could you direct the question to me?
I would like to know if Kodak is.
Are you
is-
speaking of House of Credit?
Kodak over on.
Yes,
Because,
Kodak.
yes,
Mr. Mancini, or I'm sorry,
There's
Mr.
a-
Napolitano, we have to have you sworn in, please.
Please raise your hand. Do you swear on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I did.
And please state your name for the record.
On Kodak, there is a bill this year by Deputy Speaker Hall that would make them tax exempt. Just wanted to add that as some context.
oh yeah, the reason I'm asking is Kodak has been there for several years. Where Weber just got there, so I just was trying to figure out. Although it's been there, been helping people for so long, they're not tax exempt. Hopefully they will be.
I appreciate the question, and I don't believe we've had anyone come to us and ask us yet, on what's House of Credit and listen to say. Thank you, Councilor Taylor. Any other comments, questions? Yes, Councilor Graves.
Just a comment, I believe that, Councilwoman Harris, backed them 100% and brought them here before. That's her area and she's 100% supports them, so. If she supports them, it's in her area, I think we should support it.
Thank you. Any other councilors have any other, I'm gonna go to Councilor Sanchez first.
Not a question, it's a comment, and thank you so much for coming here and all the amazing work that you and the organization does. It's awesome to hear that you guys have, saved 20 lives, probably a little bit more by folks using that, sensor. As someone that works in that field, I've heard nothing but positive feedback. So please, if there's anything else that we can do to support your org, please know that you have, strong allies here on the council.
Yes, Councilor Vargas.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The question is, can you explain me why you guys didn't go with the Kodak building on Huntington Avenue? That we invest several hours of time in working on it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I know that's in Ward 15, so we have many conversations about that. Ultimately, Kodak, who owns that building on Huntington Ave, which is right next to Route 10, sort of on that weird little spur of Huntington Ave, they were planning to move out of that facility and move into another facility on, I forget exactly the street that's in, but ultimately, their timeline was delayed based on we knew that we wanted to move this forward as quickly as possible, and they ultimately didn't end up vacating that building, so they're still occupying that building, so the space really never became available.
So they still there?
My understanding is.
Quorum is still, motion happening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? By counselors, is there a motion? Any discussion? Okay, motion made by Counselor Sanchez, seconded by Counselor Rose, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you so much for coming this evening, we appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, could you please read it? I am also going to take a motion, another motion to take something out of order. I would like to take agenda item 2. Have a motion? Motion made by Counselor Ingeval, seconded by Counselor Sanchez, all in favor? Aye, all opposed. Okay, Madam Clerk, please read agenda item number 2.
Communication from Lawrence J. Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, Sarah Silveria, Finance Director, and Crystal D. Lindberg, Deputy Finance Director and Budget Officer. Dated September 12, 2024, submitting the 5-year budget projections with the revenue and expedition projections for fiscal years 2026 through 2030 pursuant to ordinance chapter 2011 to 22, number 388.
Please raise your right hands. You swear in the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And please state your name for the record.
Lawrence J. Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, City of Providence.
Crystal Lindberg, Deputy Finance Director and Budget Officer for the City of Providence.
Sarah Silveria, Finance Director.
Wonderful. I'd also like to recognize, we have been joined by Counselor Royas. Thank you very much.
So noted.
And before we start, I know that Chief Mancini will certainly be mentioning this several times, but as you will recall, we received Chief Mancini's report at the end of December. So please keep that in mind, things have happened since December. It might be an opportunity for us to set the table for the discussion on your levy. So, Chief, if you would proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, members of the council, Honorable Council President. So, as you said, Madam Chair, this is a report that is due to the state of Rhode Island within 30 days of budget adoption. So, given that our budget was adopted early last year, this report was filed ostensibly with the state of Rhode Island, but it is also a report that's required by City Council always. In times past, it was filed in the month of December, but with understanding of the administration and the town and the order, internal order, we have moved it up to as early as the 30-day after budget adoption. So it was filed in September. And as you pointed out, and as I will say regularly, some of the information in this report does not reflect conditions that occurred subsequently, including the court settlement of the schools. While we had noted that, and while we had caveated that, we heavily cautioned that it does not include that. All things other considered, on revenues and expenditures, the finance department is working with every department in the city. We manage and monitor the city's budget daily, regularly, and we file reports monthly with the city's internal order, cash flow and operating. And we have been doing that steadily for nearly 2 decades. Having said that, Madam Chair, members of the committee, the report is in standardized format. It's a memorandum that highlights the revenues and expenditures that are the major consequences of the budget. And it mirrors the budget, not only in the current adopted year, but for the 4 years forward. So the sheets that are before you, while they're several in number, I want to just direct your attention. The legal size sheets represent the adopted budget for FY 25, and then the years that follow, So you will see their revenues. This is a sheet that highlights the revenues and their total form, as well as expenditures, and then the detail follows. And you'll see there's quite a bit of detail. The detail is run by every department, by every major ordinance line item, salaries, benefits, lines, capital, and services. With that said, Madam Chair, if I could direct your attention to the memorandum that was prepared by myself, the Finance Director, Mr. Severi, and the Deputy Finance Director, and Budget Officer, Mr. Lindberg. This memorandum is used as a guide to guide you through this process, and it speaks of the major occurrences of the budget. So if you will, beginning with property taxes, if you will, It states that property taxes are expected to grow on a projected basis in a non-reval year, so FY 25 is a non-reval year. All the conversation surrounding reval is upcoming for next year, FY 26. But that percentage of 2% is a standardized percentage that we expect and hope that we can achieve. I can tell you that through the last report filed with the internal audit for the month of January, due 30 days hence, we are running exactly where we were a year ago. And taxes are exactly in order. We are, I think even today I saw a report from the city collector, tax collections are at 78% of the levy, already 3/4 of the year through, with the upcoming collection in April. So from a tax perspective, I can say with the highest degree of respect that the city tax collector's office does do their job well in collecting. If the taxes are assessed properly, we certainly will collect them, and we don't see any diminishment there, and we expect to be on budget in terms of tax revenue. Remember, it makes up 67 to 70% of the city revenue budget. Following that is state aid. Once again, state aid, we don't know if any diminishment there. I think there was a slight reduction in the pilot based on the calculation of housing aid, I think by about a couple $100,000, but we make that up in other revenues or other reductions in expenditures. But state aid includes things such as the pilot, which is the largest component of the state aid paid to the city of Providence. School debt construction, which is the reimbursement for any funds that we expend on debt service associated with projects that were approved by the Rhode Island Department of Education. Plus telephone tax, state reimbursement, excise tax, distressed cities revenue, and meals and beverages. Those are the largest components of state pass-through revenues. With respect to fines and forfeitures, those are the areas that we assign to either the courts or in parking and other revenues, if you will. Interest income, while it's expected to diminish in the out years, starting in year FY 26 and forward, in the budget adopted in June, we had expected that revenue would generate approximately $8 million for the year, this year, FY 25, and we are in fact approaching that. The reason for that is that we're receiving interest income on opera funds that we idle at the moment or sitting in the city's treasury or bank account. So there was an expectation that there would be higher interest income received in the current fiscal year, but as we move into FY 26 and forward, that will decline by about $3 million. And again, that was noted in our report. Other departmental revenue and departmental revenue. The largest component of departmental revenue, you see a significant improvement in the area of departmental inspection and standards, whether they be building fees, licensing building fees, and permit fees. We are confident that revenue is going to come in FY 25, and I'm sure it will continue in the forward years, all things considered, given the nature of construction and construction projects. But it is revenue that we regularly rely upon, and we have seen that revenue stabilize at least through this budget this year. The next, and of course, local pilot agreements. You recall that last year the city was successful in negotiating new agreements with the colleges and universities. Thank you to the council for accepting those agreements, and that's part of the plan going forward, certainly to the next 5, and then the 5 and 10 years that follow. So we have that underway. Transfers to general fund, the item there is North Barrowtown. That's a standardized amount, it hasn't changed at all. $600,000 line item. We budget 260 of that. The difference comes from a transfer from the protective grounds. With respect to salaries assumptions, all labor contracts were in place. That were the only one that was expiring is the local 1033 that expires coming up in June, and we are currently in negotiations, and we're working towards the goodwill of completing that contract negotiation. But the police and fire are already under contract at least for the next year or more. Employee benefits include both active and retiree. Bearing in mind, again, the city is self-insured on medical. I think we do an outstanding job on that. But say for the record, that in 2015, the city's medical budget was established at $100 million for both active and retiree. Today, at $116 million, roughly a 16% increase over a 10-year period. In my humble opinion, it's a phenomenal statistic, because if we were paying for premium to take away the risk of it, of a medical fee or medical expense overrun, and therefore that would be transferred to an insurance company, we would be paying on order $15 million more each year for the privilege of having that. So the city's medical team, benefits team, with our outside medical consultant and our finance team, do a tremendous job of managing that, and that's the major category of employee benefits. Other line items have been tied to the cost of living index used in our reports. roughly in the 2.25% range. And heat, light and power, the city, once again, reflecting on the ability of our Department of Sustainability and our energy managers have done an outstanding job in that area and finding ways to reduce our reliance on certain energy products as well as to get energy savings through energy conservation and other measures. And then last in my report, the report that was filed by our team relates to the appropriations to the Providence School District. And again, because of the notion of time and this was prepared, we were in the midst of mediation and then we were not able to discuss or disclose any progress on that. And we stated fairly then what the city's position was and what the budget position was with regards to that. So having said that, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and members of the council, that rounds out the summary of the 5-year plan. We're happy to take questions on any area of that, including the revenue or expenditures and how that might pertain to tonight's other proceedings.
And I'll just start with one question, other than the, forward contribution to the schools, is there anything significant that's happened, since the preparation of this curriculum?
For the preparation for reform.
Yeah.
On the revenue side, as reported thus far, taxes are holding, but what we have learned is that the Providence Hospital, that pilot agreement, that so-called hospital agreement, is now running in jeopardy only because they have sought bankruptcy protection and they filed for bankruptcy protection, and that affects both the hospital here in Providence and Our Lady of Fatima in North Providence. The city has joined with the administration in North Providence in sending letters to the bankruptcy court in support of the sale going through. We expect that if the sale does go through, that there will be opportunity for the administration to sit with the leaders of the organization, the new entity, Centurion, which is a nonprofit based out of Atlanta, Georgia, to ideally continue with some form of pilot program consistent with what we had come to expect. The impact of that loss will be about 4.5 million in the current year, another 4 million in FY26 if the agreements can be entered.
I'm sorry, the 4.5 in the current year, and then what did you
An
say?
additional 4 million in FY26.
Thank you. Okay. All right, I'm gonna open it up for questions. Yes, Councilor Taylor.
So I'm gonna roll the clock back 7 years. I think Councilwoman Ryan can remember that guy came in front of our, to the water supply, I don't know his last name, the mayor over at Newport. There you go, that's the last thing. So he came in front of the council, at that time, we were talking money, and he said that the city needs to, do a, assessment of all the properties that we have. I guess I wanna know if that's been done, because I know as time is going on, we've got places like the old Engine 4, Shambo Fire Station that's been closed, we got Engine 5 has been closed. Camp Cronin down there is closed, whatever that is of that, the old water supply building, Chad Brown, old police station, plus whatever, I don't know what else is out there, those are the ones that I know of. Have we gone through that and see like how much those are worth, if we could sell them? What we could get for them, is it worth doing it?
There's been no formal engagement of an outside firm to do that, but I'm sure that the Department of Public Property has a listing of all properties that the city owns that are not being used and whether or not they could not be suitable for public sale. There is a process for that.
Or even like, say, Camp Cronin, if we didn't sell it, maybe we could lease it. Or do something to get some money, because they're paying taxes down there, or not using it.
It is going through board of contract and supply right now, the lease. For Camp Cronin, so we are pursuing that.
For us to lease it out to someone else, not for us personally.
No, not for us. personally.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right, I'm just going through the top of my head and I keep them up. Good thinking. Well, Shambo Fire Station's gotta be worth $1 million, if my house is worth $500,000, it's gonna be worth $1 million. And Humboldt's worth $1 million on the east side, so. And then not water supply, I'm thinking Camp Cronin, probably 2-3 million on that water. So just want to make sure we look at all the avenues. Thank you for the question. And thank you for saying the last name,
Okay, other committee members first. Anyone have any questions, comments? Yes.
Just a clarifying question, thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Chief Engineer. You said, I'm kind of confused, you said a pilot payment with, Roger Williams is how much?
4.5 million this year between the pilot on real estate and tangible.
Okay, any other committee members? Any other counselors? Have any questions? Yes, Counselor Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Mitzi, did you say we were at risk of losing that pilot revenue because they're in bankruptcy?
Before bankruptcy, Councilman, they were, being occupied, they were going to be, acquired by a nonprofit entity. And according to the legal opinion, as soon as they changed title and became a nonprofit on the state statute, there is no opportunity to collect revenue or tax revenue or even a from a non-taxable or tax exempt institution. So that risk occurred first.
Yeah.
And then as their condition worsened and they sought bankruptcy protection, that too would have a bearing on it. But we saw fit to support the sale out of bankruptcy with the premise that we think there's an opportunity because in order for that entity to acquire, they have to go before the Rhode Island Higher Education Building Corporation, where there has to be a vote of that board, and all that matters percolating and pending, it has not been completed.
Makes sense. Thank you very much.
Yes, Counselor Peterson.
Thank you. Sorry, Chief, that everything's turned this way, but I am taking a look at the 5-year projections and I think the numbers obviously that say that most are the ones that are negative, and I'm a little bit concerned that we're here where we are today and having the conversation that we are today. But I don't see any sort of understanding of what we're going to do for a year coming forward and the year after that and the year after that. And I'd like to know if there's anything that we're doing as we're making these projections for 26 and we're dealing with today's conversation. What is the intention of a proposal for 27, 28, 29, and 30? Because I think that while we're putting band-aids on situations, I'm concerned that we're gonna be back in the same boat next year, having the same conversations and having a lot of taxpayers looking at us saying, what next? I'd love for you to shine some light on
So it's a
that.
fair question, if I may.
Yes, please.
And so through the budget process, while it's centered around the current year under consideration, which coming up will be FY 26, all budgeting is done in a 2-year window because even our ordinances require us to publish. We projected 2027, or we projected at least 2026. And the reason for that is because there are revenue opportunities that may exist this year that do not exist next year, but likewise with expenditures. So budgeteers, finance director and the deputy are always looking at 2-year window. The probability of projecting even 2 years is at high risk. I often say, and I'm not being glib when I say this, the budget that's adopted is only as good that day because the next day there could be a budget break that is unexpected. So with that risk in mind, the ability to build a projected budget depends on all things known at that time and submitted. And it's not meant to be just any number. It's meant to be very thoughtful. But we show those negative numbers, those values, because we show that we have concerns in those out years. And what was the preponderance of impact that was in that budget was rising and no offsetting revenue. But here we are, and soon enough we'll be discussing the FY 26 budget with some forecast of 2027. They can be able to give you and the members of the council a much clearer picture of how that looks in that setting. But even this evening, bear in mind, I was there 9 months ago, without less educated understanding, I think going forward, every year, bear in mind, we are required to submit balance plans. Cannot be any other about it, but those projections are meant to say, unless something else changes, this is what we call it, legal.
Thank you.
Yes, Counselor Pichardo.
Thank you very much. Can you just expand on the alpha interest?
Yes.
Is that, what is that amount area? Are those restricted or unrestricted funds once it's giving that interest?
Most interest earned on general fund deposits is available for general fund disbursement. We use the opera had some restrictions, but we use that may be at the end of the thing that said we could use it. And so the vast majority of the funds, while it sat, I hate to use the word idle, it sat undecided, and then later there were decisions made. Those funds were gaining interest, and we had the ability to project through the office of the treasurer and our office what that money would be for the current year. And we believe it'll hold at approximately $8 million. I think through February, we had already earned when they looked at this, I think we had already earned half that, was 4.7 million to January. So it appears that we will meet that budget all years old, so don't forget, we earn interest in other areas.
And then the last one is in terms of, the 2025 approved budget, indicating the projected budget surplus of 25 million.
So that was an error in the report. That was meant to, be added to the report for the extra 2.5 million that we gave to the school department. And we just missed that line item in the spreadsheet, so it's really a balance budget.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was good. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Nice job. Trying to find a little extra money. All right, we appreciate that.
Even though
All right, any other counselors, committee members? Thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam for your counsel. Appreciate it.
Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please read, item number 1?
Resolution supporting General Assembly legislation allowing the city of Providence a 1-year levy cap exemption for fiscal year 2026 to be used as a procedural tool, allowing for more flexibility and options as the city seeks to pass a balanced budget this upcoming spring.
Thank you. The first thing I would like to do is, have a motion to substitute, the resolution you have in front of you. I have a motion. Second. Okay, motion made by Council Gray, seconded by Council Engelbart. All in favor? Aye. All opposed. And then I would like, before we start, to mark the, we have the presentation on the, that's going to be made. I'd like to have that marked as exhibit 2. Have a motion. Okay. Motion to approve made by Councilor Engelbart, seconded by Councilor Sanchez. All in favor? Aye. All opposed. I think what makes sense here, and I appreciate, so you have, I think it's going to be in the staff, is going to present the presentation, and then Councilor Ryan, who is going to be discussing the amended resolution. And I'm wondering if it makes sense to have, I think we should have the chief start, and then we'll have Councilor Ryan talk about the amendment. Yes, Councilor Ryan.
Thank you. If I could, I'd like to just give a brief introduction of how the amendment basically landed on our laps, and then turn it over, if I could, to the skills of our finance team down here. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Please proceed, Councilwoman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So last month, recognizing the monumental impacts associated with the unexpected court-awarded settlement with RIDE, I and a number of my colleagues introduced a resolution asking the General Assembly for the authority to allow the city to exceed the standard 4% maximum levy for just 1 year. This year, as we all know, has been anything but standard. And quite frankly, Madam Chair, I'm happy that you took items out of order and allowed the finance team to present the 5-year projections, because you clearly see with those projections that in any year, as good as any budget is, it really is a working document, and not necessarily Band-Aids, meaning no disrespect for my colleague. There are levers that get pushed and pulled, and they're all tools that we utilize to balance a budget. We're required by charter, by law, to put forth a balanced budget each year. And again, this year's not standard in any way. The statistical reval that we just went through raised property values significantly, and I know that that's a frightening thing for many. We still have our pension obligation bond. That obligation, that expense continues to rise. You know, I just read in the paper today, additional challenges and unknowns from Washington's continue to loom. We don't know how that's going to impact us. So it really is a great background provided for why we need additional tools. Last month for me, when I saw, what we were facing, the headwinds, it was simply a math question. And a call to begin having difficult discussions, and conversations. We need to have this levy cap option. Again, it's another tool. It's a lever, if you will. A tool in our toolbox available to help us achieve a balanced budget. Since last month, we all know there's been a lot of misinformation that's been shamefully presented, I believe, for political reasons, but that's the business we've chosen. I'm pleased to appear before you tonight, to have an open conversation, quite honestly. Tonight, we recognize the leadership of our council president, the mayor and his administration, his team, in collaboration with members' leadership in the General Assembly. So everyone's eyes are on this. This amendment before you tonight still asks the General Assembly to allow us to go over a maximum 4% levy this year. However, it specifies a maximum amount of 8%. That's different. I assure you this express ceiling is unnecessary. However, I recognize it's calming for some legislators. So has been the process over the decades and will continue to happen long after we have all left this honorable body. The mayor proposes a budget. The council vets it. This finance committee goes through every penny, period. The sole responsibility for approving a budget belongs to the council. It is an obligation that none of my colleagues take lightly. I assure everyone that 30 hands are on deck. We will pour over this budget, proposed new budget coming in, looking for every dollar savings we can identify, every increase or revenue stream, every delayed payment or investment that might help the cause, and every policy we can employ to lessen the negative impact on the residents of our city. That's our job. The amendment tonight also includes an ask for collaboration at all levels. I believe we'll get this done. I assure you ongoing work will continue. And the mayor and this council have absolutely the best financial advisors in place. CFO Mancini, COO Hawkins, and our financial directors, Silverio and Lindbergh, and the council's fantastic auditor, Gina Costa, and our policy teams, all focused on finding a balanced and fiscally sound approach to our fiscal challenges. And with that, I yield the floor.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Ryan. Chief Mancini.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Councilman Ryan, for your kind remarks. We appreciate it. Madam Chair, Finance Directors, particularly the budget officer, there was a deputy finance director that has worked on recommendation because of their intricate knowledge of the budget and all that is associated with this process. So with your understanding, I can check over the deputy finance director and budget officer just over there.
Thank you so much, Crystal.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for having me. So if we'd like to start with the first slide in our deck, it's just a quick overview of what is the tax levy. So in simple terms, a tax levy is the total amount of revenue a municipality can collect from property taxes in the fiscal year. If you see below this definition, you can see a snip from our budget book. This is a document we publish every single year. When we do the proposed book, you see the proposed version of this based on the assessments at that point in time and those rates. When we drop the final budget book, we update this on actual values, and this information can be found on our online budget book or in the printed version. As you can see, the levy is made up of a few components. You start with your assessed value, which in fiscal 2025 was $19 billion. You reduce your exemptions, which were $843 million, to get to a net assessment of $18.4 billion. We then take those net assessed values and we multiply them by the tax rate to get to the total levy. So in fiscal 2024, our total levy was $396 million. Okay. So the reason that we're here today is that we are requesting permission for enabling legislation for the city of Providence to exceed the tax cap set
State of Rhode Island. Rhode Island legislation has dictated that a municipality cannot increase its tax levy year over year by more than 4%. It does not matter if that increase comes from the rate, which is one of the levers that would bring the total levy up or down, or if that comes from natural growth in a budget, the 4% is capped, regardless of the source of that revenue. So for example, in fiscal year 2025, the city was able to reach that 4% cap with just new value. We did not have to touch tax rates. Bills did not change unless somebody made improvements to their home. We were fortunate in that instance to be able to generate that much revenue, and I would say that's not usual for the city's budget. It was unusual that we were able to get to the tax cap via that mechanism. So in fiscal 2025, or I'm sorry, for 2026, that means Providence, under the current legislation, has the ability to generate up to $15.8 million in new tax revenue. However, that is not the number I can budget, because I need to assume that a portion of the bills we issue will not be paid in this current fiscal year. So for fiscal 2025, we had a collection rate of 94.25%, which means that we assumed about 5.75% of the levy of the current fiscal year would not be collected in fiscal 2025. That would arrive in future years. We have a wonderful collector who does end up collecting all of those revenues, so that if you look in the budget book, you'll see that we actually have $6 million budgeted in back tax collection that kind of offsets that hit we take on the current year collection rate to help us balance our budget in the upcoming years. So this is where the math problem comes into play. We know that under the current tax cap, we can generate about $14.9 million in new revenue. However, our projected fixed costs, when this deck was built about, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and this changed as we have gone through the budget cycle, but they were about $22 million. And if we go, which means that just off the bat with the things that we knew about when we were really preparing this 5-year plan and settled the school case, we knew we were looking at $7 million we were going to need to make up before any software contractual increases, any increases to the services that our residents are receiving that are being paid or being done by private contractors and do add to our bottom line. So what makes up this $22 million?
Clarifying question?
Yes.
It's just clarifying. Thank you. So sorry to interrupt the slide. It's just a quick clarifying question. On the slide before, the 4% increase is $15.8 million. And then on this, the revenue under the cap is 14.9. Like, what's the difference in those two numbers?
The collection rate.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, so that is the revenue
That's
after we apply the collection.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, collection rate. Thank you.
Okay. Proceed.
Yes, of course. So the first fixed cost that we know is increasing year over year is our pension payment. It is going up by about $4.7 million. The pension payment in total for the general fund in fiscal 2026 will be about $97 million. That is almost a quarter of our levy is going directly to making our pension payment. Right? And the vast majority of that pension payment relates to the unfunded liability of current retirees. In other words, that is not for the current workforce. If we were paying the pension payment for just the current workforce and did not have that unfunded liability, our payment would be about $15 to $20 million. So it is a huge portion of that payment that is tied up, that is not particularly a decision, and is really us kind of paying for underfunding that happened in the 90s that we are now trying to make up for in this current levy. The next big item is medical insurance. And as the chief alluded to, we've done a very good job of mitigating that cost, but that is an increased cost in any industry. You know your medical premiums are going to go up every single year. And while we try to mitigate that as much as possible, there's really only so much you can do to prevent costs of medical insurance rising. The next one, we'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide, is the settlement to PPSD. So in fiscal 2026, we will need to budget an additional $11.5 million to meet the settlement amount in fiscal 2027 or 2026. That will grow in fiscal 2027. And it is not a one-time settlement like a lot of our legal cases are. This is a fixed cost that will reside in our budget in perpetuity. forever. So we cannot fix this settlement with a one-time revenue. It needs to be a revenue we can count on every single year. The other thing to keep in mind is that unlike most of our expenditures, the school district has a direct revenue source. It is on the tax bill. Schools, the transfer to the school department is funded by property taxes exclusively. It is unique in that sense. I can't think of any other revenues in our budget or aside from like speed camera revenue or things that are tied directly to that revenue source. Most of our expenditures are funded in general by a combination of revenues between tax revenues and departmental. This is coming straight off the tax levy. Okay? And then the last number is the projected increase in labor costs for the known contracts that we have. That's about $3.8 million, which brings us to the $22 million. That doesn't include any sort of increases in medical or other sorts of inflationary increases or contract increases. So just to kind of illustrate the magnitude of this settlement. If you look at this graph here, you can see the funding level since fiscal 2012 to PPSD. The blue line represents actual funding, for actual funding, and the orange line represents what has been budgeted. You can see that the jump from 2024 to 2026 is very significant. It is significantly more than we're able to generate under the current tax cap. And the projections for fiscal 2027 could be up to $7 million more, which would mean the contribution to PPSD in fiscal 2027 would be $154 million. It would not even fit on this chart. So we really are making a generational investment in our children and our school district in the equivalent of 4 fiscal years, which is going to be a tough challenge for all of us to get through. So how will we balance this? Well, there's really 2 ways to balance a budget. You add more revenue or you reduce your expenses. This year, we're taking a new approach to revenue where we're trying to find additional sources of revenue that reside outside our tax levy to pay for the things outside of the school settlement so that we can shift more tax dollars to funding the schools. We'll get into those on the next slide about what some of those things are. But the other thing that we're doing is we are looking at every departmental cut we can make. For the budget timeline, I'm not sure that we've ever walked through this with you folks, but I start building our budget in November. So we had a budget workshop with all of our department directors at the end of November, and I gave them until the end of January to have their budgets handed in. So they have about 2 months to prepare all of this. I would say that the compliance we have this year with our directors was unbelievable. I think like a handful of departments did not submit on time, and those departments did reach out to me and had very reasonable explanations for why. But those submissions did take this very seriously. Everybody is leaning in and they are trying to find every possible efficiency in their budget so that they can really minimize the need for this not excessive, but this increased tax. Okay. So what are the ways we're doing to do that? Well, the first is this enabling legislation, which would allow the mayor to submit a budget that requires us to exceed the tax cap by more than 4%. Or not more than 4%, but exceed the 4% tax cap up to 8%. At this point in time, I genuinely have no idea what that percentage would be. We are right in the mix of where budget season is. In addition to that, we are going through all of the municipal fines and fees. So every single fine and fee has been thoroughly examined. We've looked at a number of instances, what the staff time costs, any possible way to generate additional revenue from our fines and fees. We're also exploring consumption-based taxes, things like the commercial parking tax, or other ways that we can bring revenue into our city. Unfortunately, a lot of these revenue sources are not immediate. Just because we've proposed some of these things, it may take a couple of years for the revenue to actually make its way into our budget. And so right now, a lot of the work that we are doing is actually prepping and trying to insulate the city for fiscal 2027, because the 26 budget will be tough. The 27 will be even tougher because that $7 million increased contribution will come in a non-property tax reval year. And the year after, we have done everything we can to cut out any unessential spending. So the cuts that we may have this year will not be there next year if we cut them this year. So it is really, when the chief says that we're looking 2 years out, that's really how I'm framing particularly this 26 budget in light of the school settlement, is I am, you know, usually we're worried about 27, we're thinking about the upcoming year, but we're really focused on getting the right year, you know, the current year correct and as efficient as possible. It's a whole new game this year. It's really being looked at as a much longer term approach, which I think is in the best interest of the city. But we really we have a lot of work to do over the next couple of years to get balanced and efficient budgets. So what is the impact of a tax increase? So for every 1% increase to the tax levy, it's approximately $42 per year for owner occupied residents. That means a 4% tax increase would be about $168 per year. And while I understand that that is a tough number for some people, it is a livable number for others. And so that's the balance that we're trying to get to, is figuring out a way to equitably distribute this increased cost without putting it all on the tax bills, but there will need to be some sort of impact to the current tax bills in order to meet the needs of our fixed costs. So what happens if we can't build a cap? This is a really sad list that I've had to make a few times this year. It started when we were going to court over the settlement. And so, you know, we in the finance team have had to look through our operating budget and look at what may feel like an essential service, but is not legally required. And those are things that we have to start looking from. I don't necessarily love that we're gonna have to spend $97 million on our pension payment next year, but that's not something that we can legally not do. So when we talk about the things that we could potentially take out of the budget, should we not have the ability to exceed the tax cap, it is tricky things. It is transitioning to once every 2-week trash pickup. That will save us about $4.7 million. It's eliminating all of our community grants, of which the largest is our community libraries of Providence, which is quite frankly, I don't know how they function if they don't receive funding from the city. It is eliminating summer jobs for our youth that rely on those jobs in the summer to support their families. It is reducing recreation programming by 20%. It is potentially reducing our workforce by 10% and freezing any sort of new initiatives. It's potentially reducing snow plowing or PVD Fest, splash pads, Roger Williams Zoo, or borrowing for our capital projects. All of these things are very important to our city, and they would be very hard to lose, but they are things that we would need to contemplate should we not have the ability to exceed the tax.
Well, Madam Chair, the presentation was meant to give a little more detail as to the process that we always go through in terms of building a budget and tax levy. Last Tuesday evening, you had us before the committee, along with vision and explain that process, and I think I gave testimony. Many of your councils had asked if I could inform them further or join with them at their local committee meetings. And community meetings, and we have done that, administration has done that, joining council members and members of the finance team have done so. All in an attempt to give wider and more information associated. What does it mean to have a tax rebound? How does that process work? A tax equalization, if you will. And then the process of going to the cap and will allow this year the request to exceed the cap. This evening, before you have a resolution that is necessary to go to the general assembly. The general assembly, in fairness, everywhere will most likely not take on consideration of any matter for any city or town unless it has the passage and approval of the local body. And we certainly appreciate that. We certainly would ask that you give that more consideration, but it is a time-sensitive matter. We are at the last of the assessment process. Hearings were expanded this week to those who could get on the phone call. The assessor's work will continue on the levy static through next Friday. That's the last day that we include commercial. But at that point, she needs to begin that process of refining the models that the finance team have already been working on to find some of the best scenarios that we think satisfy levy to the cap as well as levy above the cap and those rates that would be appropriate. So with that, our work continues. I read the resolution as with the finance team members, and I'm satisfied that the language in the resolution will enable us to continue our work without having an impact as we see fit for any sort of speak.
Thank you very much, Chief. I just have, and before we go back to the amendment, I think we'll, I don't know that we need to talk about, I think everyone has the amendment before you, so we can open it up for questions, but next year, will we need to have another cap override or cap extension?
My considered opinion today is not.
Okay, and then if we could explain to everyone, so if we do exceed the cap, we are gonna have a new tax levy.
That's correct.
And that becomes the levy, and
That
so
becomes the
next year, if we switch back to the 4%
That is
cap, which we will, because we're only asking for 1 year.
That is correct.
Exceeding 1 year tax levy cap, then we can grow 4% above that
On the new base.
new basis.
That is
Okay?
correct. That is correct.
All right, I think people need to understand that. All right, I think we have Counselor Graves, then Counselor Anderson.
The cap that we're talking about, is it steadfast at 4%? Can it be 2%?
Well, in a non-reval year, Councilman, the finance department endeavors to determine revenue expansion by natural growth of the levy, permits, new additions. And depending on the economy, depending upon the confidence in the market, the housing market, we could see that. Of late, we've seen less than 2%, given some slow growth due to stagnation, inflation. But I'm confident, having seen the results of prior levies and the years that follow, that it does settle into a 2% market. Most times, the city's finance team is able to build a budget that expects the revenue to rise no greater than 2%. We work within that, all things considered. 1 year, we may find something that falls off the budget, it's replaced by something new. But this team works awful hard at managing that budget, and it's not a year-end process, it's an everyday process, so we're confident.
So my question, I think, is when we go to them, we're going to them for a 4-year cap, but it's flexible. It can be 2%, opposed to 4%, or are we going, or can we go?
We are seeking maximum.
Just
cap-
maximum,
Maximum
but-
cap authority, over the cap would be 4, making it a total of 8%.
Okay, but you want to have the flexibility of being able to go lower if we.
That is correct. If it turns out that a combination of additional revenue, identify reductions in the budget expenditures and the proper mix of tax amongst all tax classifications and satisfy the budget. Budget balance basis that does not need to go to 8%. Certainly, the administration and council will welcome.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Counselor Graves.
We're trying to meet this $15 million agreement that we have to pay because of the school department. Are we close to it now? Are we nowhere near it at all? Where do we stand, what will you project us to be?
So for the year under consideration, 1 year finance directors, because they were the ones who were closely aligned with that process, and gave testimony at mediation, and therefore, there are a number of techniques that arrived at the ability to settle it for this year, the current year. So with that said, we will most likely complete FY 25 in a balanced budget position, notwithstanding the fact that we did incur an impact to the budget that was not planned in the budget, not adopted, but there are other resources that, like the legal rule and some other savings through attrition, savings through emergency, non-essential hiring and non-essential spending. We were able to arrive at a plan that put that together. So we're confident that we can finish the year, now that we've surpassed the halfway mark in a balanced position, but those trends and conditions could not exist again in FY 26.
And this is, that's, the last page that you have, your teardrop on it, so. This is the thing that we don't want. this is our last resort. So with this levy, we can avoid this for this year. And next year we will start at a stronger point, maybe, but we're still gonna have to put in next year's increase.
Also, consider we do know that next year, in FY 27, the portion of the budget associated with the increase in the school appropriation will be changed by the current formula at the general assembly formula, or state formula. That will see an increase depending upon what the statewide education increase is. That will have an impact on that payment once again. And we would have to ready ourselves for decisions on how will we meet that portion of that, a certain increase in the budget.
So back to your thing, are we gonna be coming back to this again next year with the same doom and gloom?
Well, I would hope that we wouldn't come back with doom and gloom. I would hope that we could come back with confidence that we've managed the budget well, through the process of administration and council collaboration and all of the levers as the term is used this evening that would allow us to once again continue to sustain a balanced budget. And again, that was the deepest sincerity that FY 27, we already know that's a challenge ahead. The finance directors, myself, work daily. We're not just listening with the budget of 26, we're already thinking about the about it. So that makes the work a little complicated, but it also helps us arrive at better informed decisions, even in the more immediate budget of FY 26, because we're thinking 2 years away.
Yes, go ahead, Counselor.
This is my last one, I promise. And it's more of a request. I would like to hear what, Gina has to say in regards to some of this stuff. If that's at all possible, if you can hear.
Madam Auditor, can we swear you in? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I would.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And please state your name for the record.
I worked with Crystal on the numbers. I do not know her numbers. We were in serious times. A lot of things faced, school department's a big issue. I just believe you gotta let the mayor propose his budget, and then you have to do your due diligence and make some tough choices. And see where that goes, and yes, next year, the 27 budget will be tough. They're gonna make the tough decisions now, you have to make them 2 years in a row, it's gonna be tough. So.
And that's really all and the reason I asked her to do it, because I know sometimes we act like, oh, well, what did the city say? But, well, I want to hear from both people.
We respect that.
And that way, thank you so much, both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Graves. Counselor Annabelle.
Thank you, Sherwin. Thank you for this presentation. I know you guys worked so hard. So just really appreciate you. I just have a few quick questions. One is, for the PPSD line where you said it was like an increase in perpetuity based on the settlement. What, if anything, changes with the return to local control? Like, does that settlement, do the parameters of that settlement change once we control the schools again and it's not a back and forth with PPSD, or is there more flexibility once we have control of that budget?
So yes and no. So there is a state statute, known as the maintenance of effort regulation that says essentially you cannot contribute less to your school district from one fiscal year to the next. So if you give your school district an extra $5 million this fiscal year, you are giving them $5 million forever. Exactly, in perpetuity. There is an opportunity that I don't think many municipalities take advantage of, where you can reduce your maintenance of effort payment on a per pupil basis due to like massive declines in enrollment. But while we are under state intervention, that is not an opportunity for us, particularly in light of the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement is in effect, and it is essentially not null and void, but if we return to local control, we would potentially not have to make the increased contribution in fiscal 2027. However, one of the commissioner's criteria for returning the school to local control is that the city commit to honoring the terms of the settlement agreement, regardless of who's in control of the school district. So That's not my decision to make per se, but it is safe to assume that, again, if you give one more dollar to the school district in your appropriated budget, you are committing that dollar forever. The other thing to keep in mind is it's not, I don't know the best way to phrase this, but it's a known cost that you know you are going to spend.
Yeah.
So when we are investing in a department and they have a new pilot program, or they have a new initiative, or they want to hire a new staff member, the odds of them spending exactly the dollar amount that they think they need are not very likely, right? They may come in a buck over, like usually they come in under, because they like to make that happen. But you have a little bit of wiggle room in what you're budgeting, because you don't necessarily know that the $200,000 program is gonna cost $200,000. An increase in school is a known cost. It is not questionable. We will be giving them $147 million regardless of enrollment, regardless of if they get a huge influx of federal money, regardless of if they lose a lot of federal money. That is a commitment that we have. And I think most and all school districts are very concerned right now about what is going to happen to their federal funding.
Yeah.
So, while nothing is for sure, it is very fair to assume that the amount we contributed in 26 and again in 27 will be at the minimum of what is required to be given to the district in those years and going forward.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And just to clarify, I wasn't saying I don't think the schools deserve that amount, but I think a lot of us had questions about the PPSD budget and felt like there was a lack of transparency in their budgeting process. And so who knows what the right number is? And I think Gina is gonna try to pop in, sorry.
I just wanted to add, I think that when the school, department is doing, the city, that we can see more, we have more control, it goes to the board of contract and supply. We know what's being done, the council has more authority over the administration can see them. Being with the state, we have no idea how they're spending their money until it's spent and we go and go, so.
Yeah.
I think that is huge too, so we have more control over finances and how they get spent.
And Madam Chair, support that because you may find efficiency that if you're not going to, that with nothing else would curb the rate of increase thereafter. If we couldn't reduce it, we are in full alignment with that.
Thank you.
That's my main question for now, but I might have a comment later. But
Okay, well, that's what I'm
No,
gonna
no,
go.
before, no.
I'm going to Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, finance team. Really appreciate your hard work. My first question, I do have multiple. When was the last time we went to the General Assembly and asked to go above the 4%?
I think it was in 2012 and 13. And we got permission to work that. And that was there to their.
Thank you. In terms of the $42 per percentage, can you explain how that number is calculated?
Yeah, so that assumes that the average home is valued at $420,000, and so 1% of $420,000 implied the tax rate is approximately $32.
And
Yes, please.
was that percentage calculated with the previous home value average, or is that after assessment? I know that's like part of like the tricky, like.
It is, because right now it depends on the day someone pulled that median, that average home value price. I would say it's a combination of both probably. Our assessor is really, assessor and really us in the finance team, we are in the middle of this budget build out. And so both of our data sets are moving up and down every day, depending upon, particularly in the assessor's office, what calls have come in, what, hearings have taken place. So I believe that $420,000, if I'm looking through my recollection, is probably the 2024 levies average homeowner value. But the math would be essentially the same. If you have a $500,000 home, that would be a $50 increase per 1%.
Thank you. And I know you mentioned it, Crystal, but I do want to just say for the record that I think even $20 more for a lot of homeowners, especially in our low income neighborhoods, is extremely harsh. I think people are borrowing money right now to make ends meet. So I think it's important to recognize that while there is some families, households in the city that can afford a higher a tax increase. I definitely wanna, be that voice and uplift those voices that is, part of these difficult conversations. My next question is, you mentioned or you stated the dollar amount, for the total pension payment prediction in 2026. What would that be for the medical insurance?
It's hard to say. I think our medical is about $35 million this year. It's gonna go up to probably about 48. I would say about 48. We ran a medical deficit last fiscal year, so we are going to see a larger than usual increase in fiscal 2026. I can get the exact numbers when I have the budget. up,
No, I was just
but
wondering for like a ballpark, so
Yeah.
that probably works.
it's tough. I mean, like I said, a large portion of our levy is tied up in these very fixed costs. I know oftentimes you hear the comment that and I don't disagree with this, that a budget is a reflection of, kind of what a priority is in a city or town. And I think that particularly in Providence has to be a little bit reframed, because what those decisions are is a very, very small percentage of our budget. It's about 4 to 6%. So between 24 and $36 million out of almost $600 million is really where the decisions are made on. A very large portion of this budget is tied up in these costs that many people kind of inherited, particularly the pension is something that was underfunded in the 90s, and we are continuing to pay the costs of today.
And on that topic, it's not really a question. I think it's more of a comment in response to the conversation we've been having today. I mean, we are paying this court, settlement agreement, but it shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone. This has been challenged by the city, by the school department since the beginning of the state takeover, so 5 years now. And, while I think it's important that the council, takes responsibility as well, definitely wanna, inform the public that's listening that this is something that, in my opinion, the administration should have been planning a little better the years past, even before the current mayor. This is something that has been happening. And in terms of our budget, reflecting those priorities, if you look to your graphic from 2012 to 2017 or so, a lot of us weren't in office at that time, but it's important to note that these court settlements are, consequence or factor because of such staggered payments for so many years. Something that is kind of leading to the next point. Something that's in conversation, especially with a lot of community members I've spoken to, is they see the school budget contributions, have been pretty slow until we've been forced to do it recently. But you look at other departments, especially public safety gets brought up a lot in the same time frame. That has, for the most part, ballooned compared to the rest of the departments. And that leads to my next question: if public safety, police and fire department are included in potential workforce related cuts that you guys have shown us? That is a question.
Yes, we are looking for budget expenditure efficiencies, or cuts anywhere within the city budget.
To every department.
Every department, no department is exempt.
Thank you. My last questions, it's kind of just a couple questions all in one. Is something that I've been asked by my constituents, and I really don't have an answer, is folks are aware that we have a rainy day fund that hasn't been brought up in these conversations. Can you explain if that is a possibility, or if it's not a possibility to dip into that this year, why?
So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Berry, because we had spent a great deal of time with the both side teams and all this rainy day analysis, including our own municipal ordinance that had a requirement that we must meet certain conditions.
Sure, so I think I want to make it clear that when we say use the rainy day fund, that means we're budgeting a deficit. So we would not be presenting a balanced budget to you all for consideration.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Yes,
you
right.
clarify exactly? So I think, this question has also come up a lot for me with, constituents, with other members, with the general assembly. So could you clarify why that is true? Like just walk the,
Sure.
especially because it's nice to have this video, to see the good reference.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
So, when we talk about a rainy day fund, it is the lifetime accumulation of assets over liabilities. So over the lifespan of the city, we have, earned more than we expended by about 28 million. To use that means that you're budgeting a deficit, so you're gonna end the year in a deficit and your rainy day sort of cushion goes away. Right now, we are less than 5% of our annual budget in that excess fund balance. We should be at like a 16.7% balance in our rainy day fund balance, according to best practices from the GFOA. We are not there. If we were to move forward with budgeting a deficit, we are even in a bigger problem in fiscal 27, because that $11 million we owe the school, we owe it again next year, and we will also have an additional projected amount. I think we were thinking about $7 million, so now we've got an even bigger hole to dig out of in the next year.
So really, essentially, using the rainy day fund is almost like applying a one-time solution to a perpetual cost. It is. Oh. Yeah. So so that, again, to Sarah's point, once that rainy day fund is used, it is gone. So when we're trying to prepare a budget for fiscal year 2027, there is going to be an even bigger gap to make up, because the base revenues we could have generated in 26 to support that payment in 27 were not generated. In lieu of doing that, retained earnings from the kind of corporate world were swooped in to, really budget a deficit, to Sarah's terms. It's not a truly balanced budget. The other thing to keep in mind, and this is a fun accounting lesson you probably didn't want at all, so apologies, is that $28 million represents the fund balance or rainy day fund in our audited financial statements. There are a series of funds that are not budgeted and not presented in our operating budget that add to that total. And these are funds that live outside of our general fund. The largest one is our Parks Department proceeds fund, where all of the revenue generated in the Parks Department lives, and all the expenses associated with that revenue lives in that same fund. So the true general fund balance, the amount that would be available for us to balance this out, should we want to budget a deficit, is closer to $12 million. A lot of that is coming in from those side funds to bring that total up. And there's a very complicated schedule I can show you if you'd like to see it, but there is not $29 million sitting in a cash account somewhere waiting for us to budget it and send it over to the school district or pull into our budget to reduce any increases.
Thank you, and I just want to be clear that I think, as a capital city and just a city that wants to be somewhat healthy, we should have a rainy day fund. It's more of having a response to our constituents that are asking this question, and I do thank you guys very much for answering. Chief might have a little bit more to add.
I just wanted to
Some more sauce.
I wanted to support both directors because these two directors, they are the accountants of the city.
Yeah.
From a finance perspective. Trained in audit, trained in accounting, but let me just talk about what it would mean to begin to reduce the so-called rainy day fund. First and foremost, I don't think under any condition other than catastrophic should that be considered number one. Number two, we would have an immediate profound impact on the city's credit rating. And the city collaboratively, with the budget that we have adopted, city council support included, we have restored the city's credit rating 2 rating increases in the past 18 months. What would that mean? That would mean the next time we decide to borrow on behalf of the school to reimbursement, even a 1/4 change in that rate or any rate in between would have a significant long-term impact on the city's budget because our credit rating declined. We're proud to say that the city's credit rating at A+ and BBB+ has been outstanding. Haven't seen that in nearly 15 years. And so the last credit rating report cited that reason, said the city's reserve capacity is what's being pulled together here. We spoken about. So I want to say for the record that it would do that damage, they go.
Hold on, I think Councilor Ryan just wanted to add, and then I'll come back to you, and then I see, Councilor Gonzalez that wants to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was exactly the point that I wanted to make. We labored many years ago to bring our rating up. That impacts our borrowing. It has a catastrophic impact on a rating when you lessen the rainy day account. So it is all about fiscal stability. And I want to again applaud our team, our finance team. You folks are tremendously skilled, and because of your efforts, and you too, Chief, working with the council, finance team through the years, we have been able to increase our ratings. And that helps us, and we need to be in a posture now, particularly with our looming pension obligation growing exponentially, to keep an eye on our ratings. Thank you.
Is it quick, and then I want to get to other councilors. So
Yeah,
if
please do.
it's Councilor.
Thank you. I had a few quick things. I promise they're quick. One is, on the last page, page 10. Have we looked into like if any of these have funding sources outside of taxes that like we could help support? Like I'm thinking like, and this is not out of tax law for Roger Williams too, so I just want to be on the record saying I'm not attacking them. But like, are there things like that where they have other sources of funding, like grant funding or private development that they could be going after that like ease our burden a little bit? Like, as we're looking at these, some of them have to be city funded and some of them do not. And so we kind of like look where there's some squish like that.
We are pursuing every single possibility. I think to your point, there probably are funders that would want to pay for some of these things. However, we're in March, and so finding a funder and lining them up by July and knowing that they'll be there and having that all insured is, we don't have a ton of time to do that. So I think a lot of these initiatives are things that we need to start working on now so that we can count on them in 2027. And really planning for that upcoming year, because there is only, maybe someone will walk in my office tomorrow and say, I want to fund summer jobs. Here's a check for 350,000, and that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
But the likelihood of that happening between now and when we need to adopt a budget is not very high. I think that it's going to take a little bit of time and then outreach in order to make that happen.
Yeah.
If that's a possibility.
Okay.
Councilor Handelbar, you don't have to rush. I'm sorry. You wouldn't have an opportunity to speak, so you take your time. I'm so sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I also just, the two other things I wanted to say, one was I really appreciate the work that all the departments are doing to decrease costs. I know we spent some time yesterday in the special committee on the environment with Director De La Cruz. And she shared some of the work on the energy credits that now are being shared with PPSD, as well as the savings from consolidating our payments to the utility, which I know like many people fell asleep just saying that sentence, but it was somewhere in the range of like $35,000 to $55,000 a year, just from like increasing efficiency in how we do our payments. And so just one, hats off to David Ruggiero and Director De La Cruz on that work and their whole team, but really appreciate that everyone's really increasing the efficiency. And then also just wanted to thank Councilwoman Ryan and Council President Miller for this amended resolution. Without the amendment, I was worried I'd be walking in here to vote no, not that I don't trust you and love you, but the feedback I have from my residents, to echo Councilor Sanchez, is people are really worried. People are hurt. With the chaos at the federal level, people's budgets are even more strapped than they were before that. Our budgets are strapped, their budgets are strapped. And even $20, $50 is a terrifying sum for some people. And so knowing that we are going into this with all of our thinking caps on, looking for all the additional revenue sources and also some bounds around this makes me more comfortable supporting this. So really appreciate the work that Councilwoman Ryan and our Council President put into really making this something that I think gives you flexibility, but also gives us that ability to really go after all the other sources of funding we can. So just wanted to express thank you.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I want to echo those remarks and thank you for your leadership. I know that this is really challenging, and again, just want to thank you for all that you're doing. With regards to the potential levy, so it would be, you're saying a 12% increase if we add fiscal year 26 and 27 together, so the 8% this year, if we go to the max and then 4% next
The
year.
8% would be in total, 4% to the cap and then 4% above the cap. So a grand total increase over prior year of 8%.
Okay, so, and then at not 12% for a fiscal year, I'm saying over, so if you look at 8% for this year. And then 4% the next fiscal year.
If there was opportunity or need in the next fiscal year, based upon budget practices, we always look at whether there's natural growth of the levy, will not be a revalue. The new base for next year for 27 will be the, with due respect, should we get to the cap and then above, if that budget was adopted at an 8% total change over the prior levy. Then any change in the next year, 2027, if you will, could probably say the cumulative change would be the prior 8% and any change, but it doesn't necessarily mean a tax increase. It may be expansion of the levy, natural growth, which finance managers have always looked at. They always look for natural growth.
So, but the potential levy could be 12%.
Only if we were to increase the next year's budget by any percentage of that, only if there's a needed in it.
So at 32% of the single family assessment increase, what does that increase look like across the board? When you apply the 8% for fiscal year?
We're in the process of demonstrating models that the tax assessor is still working on. And as we testified last week, that's going to with vision present. We won't have that exact model, not yet ready until the assessor completes their work, and finance team working through the process will arrive at what we believe to be appropriate, based again on budget and budget expenditures.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I just have a question about commercial revals. Are we down with office vacancy rates there? Because we've seen the residential assessments. But my concern is that if people contest or appeal their commercial reassessments with the assessor's office, that could bring the potential tax revenue down, especially because those people have more resources, lawyers, appraisers, whereas our average resident.
So the process of appeal, as we had learned, as we had discussed, and I was learning last week, is not the stage that we're at today. This is a hearing and then opportunity to determine whether your new value is accurate based on square footage and other attributes, including conditions of property. That's across the strata of all property, commercial and residential, whether it's all occupied, not occupied. In any appeal process, and including if it's commercial, it's not an automatic. That process has to be based on some factor that demonstrates that there was a decline in the revenue of commercial property, not just vacancy. And then only then can that process be measured by the appeal process, which if not successful at the administration level, the assessment, it then goes to the Board of Tax Review. And if not satisfied there, then it goes to Supreme Court. So to determine that ahead of time, will there be some changes up or down? Generally, there are. We won't know that yet. The reason why Ms. Lindbergh and Ms. Silveria said that's why we don't budget 100% of revenue from a levy. That would be a practice that we would never subscribe to, and I don't think any municipal finance official would ever do that. There is that presumption that some of that possible levy revenue will be necessary to offset appeals, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yeah, so I understand all of that. I'm just asking, do we anticipate that that's going to be down with commercial vacancies?
only anecdotally, I don't think there's been a significant decline in the commercial market overall.
And then with regards to, this is the last question, relief, because as you heard from some of my colleagues, there are a lot of people out there who are very concerned about this. Particularly people in neighborhoods all across the city who are worried about being displaced, and any increases could really harm and hurt those people, or they feel that way. Are we looking at, and this is beyond maybe this fiscal year, but into the future, ways that we can assist those folks, whether it's looking at future exemption increases? Maybe it's not this fiscal year because we've got to balance the budget. It's a circuit breakers. There are other ideas out there. Is that something that the
Every
administration
consideration is currently in motion, including looking at the current level of dollar value, exemption value of every exemption. And I will just say for the record, the city of Providence preceded the state of Rhode Island and offering a $10,000 small business exemption on transport tax, even before the $50,000 exemption was ushered in. And that was the work of the finance team and the assessor to arrive at what's that impact. We were to alleviate 2,500 tangible shares being filed annually as a result of that exemption. So we are always looking at ways that we can assist, and I think that was about $800,000 difference in our budget, but it was helpful to small business.
You finished? Okay, well, hold on, Councilor Reyes, you have some comments and concerns,
Just a few questions that, Chair, I'm gonna stand up so I can check my voice. My question was, and I haven't really, no one's given me like a concise answer on this, and maybe the city solicitor could chime in. It's regarding the 4% tax levy state law. Now, and let me know if my line of sort of thinking is on path here. Because, so the current state law says that basically, if there's an emergency situation and there are conditions under state law that sort of governs that, that the city can move forward and if those conditions, according to, I think, the Department of Revenue or in general are met, it would be certified and the process can move forward and be granted. But given, I guess, my other question is, that our current enrollment is not applicable to that.
Yes.
And so therefore, we need state enabling legislation to exceed the tax levy, because this technically isn't an emergency situation.
That is correct.
Okay,
There are 4 conditions. One of them is done through the Office of Auditor General. The other 3 are done through the Department of Revenue. Each of them require emergency conditions. For example, if there was a business that was coming in to take out an entire neighborhood block that was vacant land, because of the costs associated with infrastructure, sewer lines, et cetera, that would be an emergency condition. Or the need for additional fire or police because of that expansion. Then you would go, you could use that exemption added, if you will, but none of those conditions apply to us. And each of those conditions requires 4/5 vote in the city council.
that's right, that's right. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna try to hit the counselor, so. Yes, Counselor Morris.
Thank you very much. Margaret. Page 9. So for example, we say the 4% increase for. If. Unoccupied will be $168, right? What about the person who doesn't leave the property, how much that will cost? Per property, like, we don't have the figure yet, or we are working.
Yeah, that was predicated on a typical owner occupied, and I will say that when Ms. Lindbergh gave the example of value, it could also be said on tax dollar change. For example, if the typical $4,000 owner occupied tax bill, which is probably the equivalent of a $350,000 home. If there was a straight 4% increase on a $4,000 tax bill, that would be an annual increase of approximately $160, or as this net result, 1%, every 1%, roughly $42. So it's based upon the owner occupied.
Or you saying that will be 168 on top of the tax that they're paying today?
Correct. That is correct.
For on and off, for the person who lives in the house.
That is correct.
So we're trying to figure out whatever that person doesn't live in the property has more properties that doesn't qualify for on.
Again, that conversation is premature only because the fact that it is a revalue. Last week, we discussed the notion of what's called tax equalization. First step in every process is to bring the current rates down to an amount against the new higher citywide values overall, not by law. To determine the reduction of the same revenue that was generated by last year's adopted tax. When that occurs, then the rate is then grown upward to manage the budget. So that's the process. So it is not taking today's tax rates against the values that have been submitted by the revale company. And that process is in motion. The assessor is making determinations in all the areas of tax classification.
Can I?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So page 10, all these bullet points that you financially put to the doesn't scare me. Because nobody's going to have the trash pick up every 2 weeks. There's gonna be a lot of trash in the city, like if we go this way, that's thoroughly know. But we can save money to this company, we start cutting on the working items that we pick up once a week. We can go once a month and you save money. And we can save money like if we enforce the recycling that we're not enforcing yet. But I know it's in process because we need to invest $10 million to get a new trash can because every single trash can is broke.
That's correct.
And that's the way that we have to, and this, especially with waste management, there's a lot of work to be done. And I will like applaud you to go into and dig more to this company that we have a contract with them, how we can figure out to have a better services with less cost in the taxpayer.
I can tell you that the administration is making every effort, including in the area of missile waste, to determine where there are opportunities, but many of those conditions are already under consideration. They're not yet ready for implementation if they're available. Thank you for the discussion.
No, I don't wanna dig into more, so I'm sorry, thank you.
I'm sorry, Counselor Sanchez.
Just to follow up on Councilman Vargas's question about owner occupied, I know you're still going through the mechanisms, but is it safe to say, that folks that, have property in the city of Providence that don't pay the commercial rate, so they're not more than 6 residential units, will see a higher percentage, increase?
We can't say that at this.
No.
Not at this point in time, no.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's still way too early to know.
Counselor Peterson.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't turn it in. Minor have comments, have questions. I do want to thank the sponsor of this resolution. I was one of the people that supported bringing this forward because I thought it was extremely important to have this conversation in the setting. It's really important to not only understand what we're dealing with and but also find a way to explain and also really see the dire constraints that we're at, which is, it seems like we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place currently. To this level, and it's so much for your financial prowess, it's always appreciated. Couple of quick questions. As part of the settlement with PPSD, was there a request for a forensic audit that was done, and is that going to happen?
There was a request for an audit, it is in process, we don't have final results right now, but I was just meeting with the company on it. So it's very.
As part of the resolution, one of the questions that's on there, one of the statements that's on there is that we're gonna work with, the Rhode Island General Assembly are actually in developing all of this. We were working with him in our state delegation. If there's anybody that can help me just understand who in our state delegation we were talking with.
I'm gonna, if it's all right, I'm gonna have the council president answer that, chief, and if you would want to add after that, you certainly can, but I prefer the council president to answer.
So I was gonna, at the end, ask everyone so one of the things that's been, very clear in the last few weeks is how much the General Assembly, particularly Providence delegation, and I think there's, I don't even need to name names, because almost everyone has been, how can we help? How can we figure this out together? There's two things. There's some things that the administration has proposed and they're already in motion and they're at the General Assembly and we've passed on the floor already a resolution supporting them. There's others though, right? There's other items that we can talk about in the next couple of weeks. We should be talking about together with the General Assembly. We should come back to, this body with like a list, we should work with finance to put a dollar on, how much new revenue is worth. Right, so, I know, I also share part of the reason that, I was so interested in working with the sponsor to make amendments to this resolution is because I feel the same concerns, right? That I don't think this council is gonna pass a budget, I know we won't actually, is gonna pass a budget that, creates a heavier affordability cost, in a city that has, in the time that I've lived here, right, become wildly unaffordable. And so being able to think like truly creatively about ways that, and we see the 5-year projections, like we need other revenue sources that are outside of the levy, we just do. Providence does, and I think that the General Assembly sees that. I think that there's, if we are working together, locked up and supporting between administration and council, there's a path there. So, you know, I think all of this becomes a lot less theoretical very, very soon, right? When it's March 13th, we'll have a budget in a month. We'll have those conversations with the General Assembly in the next couple weeks. We'll have a list, you know, of revenue sources that seem realistic and like adding to like, I'm not the, right, like, I think that's an all come, like every council member should be thinking about that. We should be talking to our General Assembly senators and reps about that. Because I think there's ideas that we haven't even thought of, and some of them are pretty easy to implement. So.
Yes, you can.
I appreciate your comments, Council President. I 100% concur. My next question is, does the city rely heavily on federal funding? Or in general to provide services to other people or to other organizations?
Certainly, yes. Like our planning department gets a tremendous amount of CDBG funding. You know, they're not under local control now, but I know that the school district receives a tremendous amount of funding from the federal government. I don't have our annual federal audit in front of me. But I would say that most of our federal dollars are supporting programmatic initiatives. There's no federal dollars, now that we can talk about ARPA that is supporting our operating budget.
Thank you for that. The reason I ask is because, I think we're all privy to exactly what's happening on the federal level, and I think that if we don't start preparing for some really severe cuts to everything that's coming in terms of our development, that's just the offset of a larger of this problem. Is there's problems that are just double, and we're gonna be in an even worse situation with the city. So that's just something that I want to point out. And to that point, I would like to go on record in saying that we should continue to be mobilizing all of the opportunities that we have with the contracts that we have currently, whether it's renegotiating them. And in that I include our pilot agreements. I think that while I understand that these are MOUs and MOAs that are already currently in place, I do believe that our mezzanettes should be contributing far more so that the longevity of our city is maintained at the very best that we can. Thank you very much for everything that you guys are doing. I really appreciate it. And I'll be seeing you live.
All right, we have Counselor, all right. Counselor Graves, can I call him Pro Tem Charter just because he hasn't spoken yet? Pro Tem.
Thank you. On the resolution, and I have a couple of questions. You mentioned, you recall how, that last time that Providence asked for increase of levy, that's the 4% of the General Assembly. Was there a cap during that time? Yes. And what was that cap? And what was it maxed out? Or was it pretty much under?
The cap was,
Yes.
I think it started at 5.25 and then legislatively, it auto reduced down to the 4%.
May I clarify? There, you're asking if there was a cap, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go
Carol.
ahead.
You're asking if there was a cap on the amount to exceed? Is that what you're asking?
Rather than was there a
Yeah.
4% cap then?
No.
When it first came into existence?
Chief, I think it's, the question is, I think you said that we've done
Ceiling.
Yeah, the ceiling.
was there a ceiling on the one time that we
That
exceeded?
was that the city requested.
No.
No,
Okay, thank you.
there was no count. So it was just open. Pretty much,
Yes.
Yes, yes.
The legislation, when adopted by the General Assembly, began in 2000, it started like today at 4%, it was at 5.25%. With a auto reduction over the next, following 2 or 3 years, to get it to 4%. It has been 4% for at least the last 4 years.
yes, but what I'm saying is, I was asking is what you were referring to. What the city was asking to go above that 4%.
No.
Was there a cap? And at what level, what percentage did the city pretty much use at that time? So I know during the Tavares
Yes.
Administration, yeah.
I can't recall, but I don't exactly remember the percentage of how much it was over the survey of that information.
And the reason why I ask is I'm one of those that was advocating for at least putting a cap on it, because not that we don't trust the administration or it's just that we also, as humans, now that we have that window opportunity, asking the General Assembly to give us that authority, doesn't mean that we have to go up to the 8%, but I was comforted in the sense to see that the finance along with our team, they're looking at the numbers if we wanted to do pretty much nothing, right? But I'm also hesitant, as we continue to see, to blanket by voting today or then later on the floor, is that we all in agreement that we're going to increase taxes, right? Which some members have expressed, but I understand that we have to make very difficult decisions because prior administrations were not saving, if that was an option, right? Putting some money aside because of this lawsuit was coming up. So one of the questions is, will prior budgets have allowed the city to save money, foreseeing possibly a potential settlement, or the court pretty much telling the city to pay up?
So we have in the past, we had money in legal accrual for part of this. The problem is the $11 million isn't a one-time payment. We would have had to have been growing our budget even more over the past several years to get to a place where we're not looking for $21 million. We would have already had some growth there. But we can't solve that problem with the savings account because it's a built-in annual expense from now on. That makes sense.
Right, but in the prior years, budgets could not have been included though.
We would have had to been budgeting, and we would have had to increase the budget by that savings amount.
Correct. So during those years, the taxes were not increased. As it was always noted, the past 8 years or so, the taxes were not increased because the budgets remained balanced and pretty much the savings were not derived from that. So there's no special account of savings actually now with 5 million or 2 million.
No, so when you use a savings account, that's just a bank account. So when you're using just your savings account without a revenue source, that's a deficit. That's your budget deficit. Right?
And I ask that is because of the opera money, right?
That comes back to your May date fund that you can't touch, because you're gonna have to do a deficit. So you can't touch that either if you did excess.
And that's why I want to sort of have that clear, and that's because you hear or you presented on the opera funds that is deriving some interest, and therefore, right now we have about $8 million there. That's why I asked. So my other question, if possible, is so the General Assembly receiving this resolution as the part of the process, and the president and the mayor are gonna go up there. Not 100% sure, 100% that it's gonna pass, but most likely, right, because we're in that crisis, or we have to fund the education from our city. In knowing that the state has also a deficit, does this preclude the state from providing additional funds to the city to provide some relief for the taxpayers? Not just so directly to education, because the education we know is being provided by the state, but does this preclude the General Assembly providing additional money to provide, to relieve taxpayers?
No, it doesn't
Some,
include that, but you would be, I think we would have to be asking for that additional funding in perpetuity, because the next year we would have a budget hole.
yeah, well, in perpetuity, but also year for year. I know that before we used to, you mentioned the pilot money that we received for the city. And so do you project that there might be some increase on that, or decrease, or just level funding?
We've seen while the formula evolves annually based on property values and what is appropriate. We have seen, we're fortunate to see what we believe would be nearly identical.
Again, the reason I wanted clarity on this is on the resolution, because one, it's great that we came to that conclusion that we put a cap on it. Two, it is a very difficult time that we're living in, and that we have to somehow land somewhere that we as Providence residents have to somehow invest more money in education. But I also implore the General Assembly to provide some tax relief for the city of Providence, along also for our kids. More so, because this has been going on for over 20 years. That's why we implemented that Crowley Act at that time. And if I don't know the numbers yet, but if we look at the investment in our kids, it hasn't been enough. It's been just enough to get us by, and that we're proud that we receive additional money. But I think that the General Assembly, even though I recognize that we're all going through fiscal challenges, I think the General Assembly can actually still invest in our city that we've been suffering, and really our kids and our homeowners have been suffering tremendously because of the dropout rate, tax increases and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, with any counselors not been recognized, we have, I think, another question from Counselor Graves.
I'm going back to what all my other colleagues have touched upon again. That's the reval, situation. And I agree with, Councilor Sanchez when he was talking about the burden that is put on, the property owners, because this tax is, even though we say, oh, it's $168, that's a lot for a lot of people. But then we're gonna also, with this thing, if we have to put that levy in, we are gonna be taxing the city. And if they are taxed, then it's the same group that's gonna be double taxed. Because the whole city's gonna have to pay something, but then they have to pay something in this $168,000, right? I mean, 100, not thousand. Oh, God, no. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's not a double tax, but I'll let the chief answer.
No, let the chief answer.
Okay.
So the chart that showed that graphic was meant to say in either way, whether it was a value increase or a combination of value and rate change, upward or downward. If there was a 4% increase, only a 4% increase, nothing to do with the request of the cap. If I had said that the average homeowner's bill is probably $4,000, then 4% increase, straight math is $160.
So that's it. Okay.
That's just for statistical conversation to arrive at how would this impact be at 4? Then again, what would it be if we went above the cap? And equal some, another 4%. So it was meant to be a statistical point, if you will. We don't know what that'll be until we have all the modeling with the citywide, and then of course, homeowner by homeowner values, by classification, and then by the models that we use for tax rates.
Okay, so it's 968 plus this 42 is
No,
160.
It would be, again, it was meant to be a statistical analysis.
Okay. Okay. And I don't know, but are we supposed to be, putting this in?
Yeah, we already did. We marked it as an exhibit. We substituted the resolution. So what we're voting on this evening is approval of the substituted resolution. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I think with that, I think,
Like a motion we approve.
Second.
Amended.
That's
as is.
amended.
the substituted.
Yeah.
It's now amended.
Amended, okay, that's amended.
Yeah.
Motion
Second.
made by Councilor Taylor, seconded by Councilor Graves. Is there any discussion? Yes.
I just definitely gonna, be voting in favor of this resolution, just to keep the ball rolling in terms of getting our budget in April. I do want to make it clear that I'm gonna be trying my best as a city councilor, once we receive the budget, to make sure that the people that are most struggling and most vulnerable in our city right now are at least impacted as much as possible by tax rate increases.
And I would also just like to say that, I think it's vital that we really dig down, as this council president has stated, on other revenue sources. We can't continue on these. This is gonna be an impossible situation for a while. While those additional revenue sources may not be applicable this year, I mean, we can start getting them in place, and I think we work together with the city administration, and go up and also work with our, I see you left, we've got, our Providence delegation. I think we all know we're in a bad situation. That if we can work together and really come up really hard on the revenue sources and be creative about it, then I really think that, that would put us in a much better position. So I hope that's what we're doing very quickly, and that we can come together and work on that. So with that, any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, and I just have to thank you so much. We have a wonderful finance team. We really do, and I just, can thank this town for, this is different.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Please, we have not adjourned yet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under the committee, council and council president, on behalf of the finance team and the administration, we thank you for your consideration. We will honor your request. For the big request.
Thank you. Councilor Graves has made the motion to adjourn. And a second.
Second.
Second by Councilor Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you guys, we're working on.
Thank you. You can